I'm 89 years old. I know that because every morning when I wake up, my knees remind me. My hands remind me. The mirror reminds me. And the empty side of the bed, well, that reminds me of something else entirely. I want to talk to you about something that most people won't say out loud. Not on camera, not to their friends, certainly not to their spouse. And I'm going to say it because I'm 89 and I've already lost the person I would have been most afraid to say it to. So what do I have left to lose? Here it is. I was lonely in my marriage. Not the whole time, not every day, but for stretches of years, I lay next to a man I loved, a man who loved me. And I felt like I was living in a house made of glass. He could see me, I could see him, but neither of us could reach through. And if you're watching this right now, and there's a tightness in your chest because you recognize that feeling, if you've ever rolled over in bed and looked at the person beside you and thought, how can I feel this alone when you're right here? Then I need you to stay with me. Because I learned something. I learned it too slowly. And I learned it at too high a cost. But I learned it. And I don't want you to wait until you're 89 and sitting in a quiet house talking to a camera to understand what I'm about to tell you. I married Harold in 1956. I was 23. He was 25. We got married in a little church in Decatur, Illinois, and my mother made my dress from a pattern she found in a McCall's magazine. It didn't fit quite right in the shoulders, but I didn't care. I didn't care about anything that day except the way Harold looked at me when I came down that aisle. He had this way of pressing his lips together when he was trying not to cry. Like if he held his mouth still enough, no one would notice his eyes were wet. I noticed. I always noticed. We were so young. People say that like it's a warning, but at the time it didn't feel young. It felt ready. It felt like we knew exactly what we were signing up for. We did not know what we were signing up for. The first year was fine, better than fine. We were learning each other's rhythms. He liked his eggs a certain way. I liked the radio on in the mornings. He left his shoes by the door in a way that drove me absolutely out of my mind. Just tossed there, like he'd been raptured right out of them. I would move them. He would toss them again the next day. I'd move them. He'd toss them. It was a little dance. For a while, it was even funny. But somewhere around year 3, year 4, the funny wore off. And what was underneath wasn't anger exactly. It was something quieter. It was the feeling that he wasn't thinking about me when he tossed those shoes. That I had become background noise, part of the furniture. Something he expected to be there, but didn't really see anymore. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not telling you Harold was a bad man. He wasn't. He was a good man. He worked hard, he came home, he didn't drink too much, he didn't run around. By every measure the world cared about in 1960, he was a fine husband. A fine husband. But fine is a very cold word when you're lying awake at 2 a.m, wondering if the person next to you even knows you're there. The loneliness didn't come all at once. That's what people don't understand. They think something has to go wrong, an affair, a betrayal, a big dramatic fight with broken dishes and slamming doors. But that's not how it happened for us. It was quieter than that. Much quieter. It was Tuesday nights watching television in the same room without speaking. It was eating dinner across from each other and talking about the kids' dentist appointments, but never saying, "How are you?" And I don't mean, "How is your day?" I mean, "How are you inside, in the places you don't show anyone?" We never asked that. I think we were both afraid of what the answer might be. So we talked about the gutters, about the electric bill, about whether the Hendersons down the street were going to sell their house. We became very, very good at talking about nothing. We could fill an entire evening with words that didn't mean a thing. And we'd go to bed and say goodnight and roll to our separate sides. And I would lie there in the dark, listening to him breathe and thinking, this is my life. This is what I chose. And he's right here. And I have never felt more alone. The kids came along, and that helped for a while. Not because it fixed anything between us, but because it gave us a shared project, something to focus on that wasn't the growing silence. We had Sarah in 61 and Michael in 64, and suddenly there was so much to do. So many diapers and feedings and school plays and soccer games, that we could pretend the distance between us was just busyness, just the season of life we were in, just what happens when you're raising children. I told myself that. For years I told myself that. When the kids are older, we'll find our way back to each other. When things settle down, when there's more time. There is a very dangerous lie that lives inside the word when. I want you to hear me say that. When is where love goes to starve, because when turned into the kids starting school. Then when turned into the kids being teenagers. Then when turned into the kids leaving for college. And then one evening in 1982, I was standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes, just standing there with my hands in the warm water. And Harold was sitting at the table behind me, reading the newspaper. And the house was quiet. No children's voices, no cartoons from the other room, no one asking for help with homework. just quiet. And I realized I had nothing to say to him. Not because I was angry, not because I didn't love him, but because we had spent so many years talking around each other instead of to each other, that I had forgotten how. I had forgotten how to be honest with my own husband. And I know, he had forgotten how to be honest with me. That's the thing about distance in a marriage. It doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like weather, like something that just happened to you. But it's not weather. It is 1,000 tiny choices made every day to stay safe instead of stay close. I should tell you about the fight. There was one fight, one real fight, that mattered more than all the others. It was 1979, maybe 1980. Harold had been passed over for a promotion at work, and he was upset about it. But he wouldn't say he was upset. That was Harold. He'd get quiet. He'd get clipped. One-word answers. This hard jaw. And I knew, I could feel it in my bones, that he was hurting. But instead of saying, I can see you're hurting, and I'm here, I got irritated, because his silence felt like punishment. It felt like he was shutting me out, and maybe he was. But what I know now is that he was shutting me out because he didn't know how to let me in. He had never been taught that. No one ever taught men that, not back then. You were supposed to be strong. You were supposed to handle it. You were supposed to come home and mow the lawn and carve the turkey, and never once admit that you were afraid or sad or lost. So one night he came home and I'd made pot roast. And he sat down and I asked him how his day was. And he said, fine. And something in me just broke. Not loudly, but I set down the serving spoon and I said, you know, Harold, I am so tired of fine. I'm tired of fine. I'm tired of sitting in this house with a man who won't even tell me what he's thinking. I might as well be married to the wallpaper. And he looked at me, and for just a second, just 1 second, I saw something in his face. This flash of raw, open, desperate something. Like a door cracked open. Like he wanted to say it, whatever it was. The real thing. The true thing that was eating him alive. But then his jaw tightened, and he said, the pot roast is dry. And that was it. That was the moment. The door closed. And I was so hurt, so insulted, that I didn't try to open it again. I cleared the table in silence. We watched the news in silence. We went to bed in silence. And another night passed. And another. And another. I tell you about that moment because I have replayed it in my mind 1,000 times, 10,000 times, and every single time I wish I had done something different. I wish I had not walked away. I wish I had pulled my chair around the table and sat right next to him. close enough to touch his hand, and said, "I'm not asking about the pot roast. I'm asking about you. And I'm not leaving this table until you tell me something real." But I didn't do that, because it was easier to be right than to be close. And that is a lesson I paid for with years of silence, years of sleeping beside a stranger who was supposed to be my best friend. Now, I know some of you are listening to this and thinking, well, that's her story. My marriage is different. And maybe it is. But I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly. Not to me, but to yourself. When was the last time you told your husband or your wife something that scared you? Not something small, not "I'm worried about the car payment." I mean something real, something that lives in your chest. Something like, "I'm afraid you don't find me attractive anymore," or "I feel invisible in this house," or "I don't know how to reach you, and it terrifies me." When was the last time you said something like that? If you can't remember, then I need you to hear what I'm about to say. The loneliness you feel in your marriage, it is not because love is gone. In most cases, the love is still there. It's buried, maybe. It's malnourished. It's gasping for air under all the logistics and the routines and the resentments and the exhaustion. But it is still there. Love doesn't usually die in a marriage. It starves. It starves because neither person is brave enough to feed it. And feeding it is not grand gestures. It's not a vacation. It's not a diamond ring. It's not renewing your vows on some beach somewhere. It's much simpler than that, and much harder. It's turning to the person you share your life with and saying the thing you're most afraid to say. I learned this, finally, but I learned it late. I learned it in a hospital room. It was 2003. Harold had a heart attack. Not a fatal one, not that time, but bad enough that they kept him for 6 days. And I sat in that hospital room in one of those terrible plastic chairs, and I watched him sleep with tubes in his arms and a monitor beeping beside him. And I thought, if he dies tonight, what would I regret? And the answer came so fast, it almost knocked the wind out of me. I would regret the silence. Not the arguments, not the hard years, not the dry pot roast or the shoes by the door. The silence. The thousands of nights when I had something to say and I swallowed it. The thousands of times I chose safety over truth. The way I let pride build a wall between us, brick by brick, year by year, until we were two strangers performing a marriage instead of living one. He woke up on the third day, groggy, confused, and I was sitting there, and he looked at me, and I was crying, and he said, God, I can still hear his voice. He said, "Helen, what's wrong?" And I almost said, "Nothing." Can you believe that? Even then, even sitting in a hospital room with the possibility of losing him forever, my first instinct was to say, "Nothing. I'm fine." But I didn't. For once in my stubborn life, I didn't. I said, "Harold, I have been so lonely, and I think you have been too. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to waste whatever time we have left being polite instead of being real. I want to know you, the real you, not the one who reads the paper and says, 'Fine,' the one underneath. I want to know him before it's too late." He didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at me, and then his chin started to tremble. That same thing he did at our wedding, pressing his lips together, trying to hold it in. But this time, he didn't hold it in. This time, the tears came, and he said, very quietly, "I didn't think you wanted to know." And there it was, 50 years of marriage, 50 years, and he didn't think I wanted to know. That broke my heart. It still breaks my heart, because he was wrong, but he wasn't crazy for thinking it. I had given him every reason to believe that I was fine with the surface, that I didn't need more, because I never asked for more. I never pushed past his walls. I knocked a few times, yes. I complained, yes. But I never sat down on the other side of that wall and said, "I'll wait. Take your time. But I'm not leaving." I was so busy being hurt by his silence that I never stopped to think he might be just as hurt by mine. After the hospital, things changed. Not overnight. Not like in the movies where there's a big speech and suddenly everything is healed. No. It was slow. It was awkward. It was two old people learning to talk to each other for the first time. We started with something small. And this is the thing I want to tell you, the thing I want you to do tonight. It's so small you might think it won't matter. But I'm telling you from the other side of a 60-year marriage, it is the most important thing I ever did. Every night before we went to sleep, we would lie in bed, and one of us would say, "Tell me something true." That's it. That's all. Tell me something true. Not, "How was your day?" Not, "Did you pay the electric bill?" Not, "Did you call the doctor?" Just, tell me something true. Something real. Something that's actually happening inside you right now. And at first, it was hard. Harold would stiffen up. I could feel it. His whole body would go tense, like I'd asked him to disarm a bomb. And sometimes all he could manage was, "I'm tired." But even that, even "I'm tired," was more honest than fine. Because when he said, "I'm tired," he meant it in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. He meant tired of pretending, tired of carrying things alone, tired of being afraid that if he showed me who he really was, I might not stay. And some nights I would say things I had never said to anyone. I told him I was afraid of getting old. I told him I sometimes felt like I had disappeared into being a mother and a wife, and I didn't know who I was underneath all of that. I told him I missed the way he used to look at me, like I was the only person in the room. I told him that sometimes when he fell asleep before me, I would watch him breathe and pray, actually pray, that he wouldn't stop. And he would listen, not fix, not argue, just listen. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how powerful it is to be heard, truly heard, by the person you love? It is oxygen. It is water. It is everything. We had 14 more years after that hospital stay. 14 years. And they were, I won't say they were perfect. Harold still left his shoes by the door. I still nagged him about it. We still argued about the thermostat and whose turn it was to take the trash out and whether the grandchildren were spending too much time on their computers. We were still us, but we were different. We were closer. There was a tenderness between us that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, buried under all that armor we'd built up over the decades. Either way, those last 14 years were the ones I hold closest. Those are the ones that feel like what marriage was supposed to be. Harold used to do this thing in those years, this small, ordinary, unremarkable thing that I would give anything to experience one more time. We'd be driving somewhere, just running errands, going to the grocery store or the pharmacy, nothing special. And he would reach over and put his hand on my knee. He wouldn't say anything. He'd just rest his hand there. And in that touch was everything he couldn't always put into words. I'm here. I see you. I choose you. Still. He passed away in 2017, quietly, in his sleep, in our bed. I woke up on a Tuesday morning and I reached over to touch his shoulder the way I always did. And he was still and cool and gone. I don't talk about that morning very much. I can't mostly, but I will tell you this. In that moment, in those first terrible seconds when I understood what had happened, my first thought was not, I should call 911. My first thought was, I didn't get to say it one more time. Tell me something true. It's been almost 8 years now. I live alone in the house we shared. His shoes aren't by the door anymore. His chair at the kitchen table is empty. I still make coffee for 2 some mornings, out of habit, and then I stand there looking at that second cup and the house is quiet now in a way that used to scare me when the children left. But this is a different kind of quiet. This is the quiet of absence, of permanent absence. And it has taught me something that I want to say to you very clearly, very directly, because I need you to understand it not in your head, but in your bones. You will not always have the person sitting across from you at the kitchen table. You will not always have the warmth of another body in your bed. You will not always have the chance to say the thing you've been holding back. The silence between you and your spouse, the one that feels so heavy, so permanent, so impossible to break. It is not permanent. But it will become permanent if one of you doesn't find the courage to speak first. Someone has to go first. Let it be you. So tonight, when the house is quiet, when the dishes are done, when the television is off, turn to the person you married and say 4 words. Tell me something true. And then wait. Let the silence breathe. Let it do its work. Because fear is no match for 4 honest words. Say them now, while the coffee is still warm, while the chair across from you is still full, while the hand you want to hold is still there to hold. Say them now. Tell me something true.